What would you do if a crying stranger knocked at midnight, begging to rent your spare room, while a black SUV sat across the street with its lights off and the engine ticking? The rain was punching my porch so hard the mailbox rattled. I just finished scraping drywall mud off the kitchen ceiling, third leak this month, when the knock came. Three quick taps, then the kind of silence that holds its breath. I wiped plaster off my fingers, stepped over Micah's Lego city, and opened the door. She stood there trembling, early 20s, hair plastered to her cheeks, backpack clutched to her chest like a life preserver. "Is the room still available?" she asked, voice small but steady in that way you only get after you've cried yourself dry. Over her shoulder, the SUV didn't move. No dome light, no cigarette glow. Just there, idling in the dark, like a held thought. "This is a kid house," I told her. "Cereal on the floor. Quiet after 9. No drama. I can do quiet," she said. "Please." Micah skidded into the hallway wearing mismatched socks and the serious face he saves for strangers. "Do you like pancakes?" he asked, because around here, that's the metric. "I can learn," she said and tried to smile. "Come in before you drown," I said, stepping back. She crossed the threshold like it might disappear behind her. I hung a towel around her shoulders, set hot tomato soup on the table, and nudged it closer. She warmed her hands on the bowl like she'd forgotten what heat felt like, then slid an envelope toward me, thick stock, crisp edges, the kind of paper rich people think is normal. "I can pay tonight," she said, "whatever your rate is." "1 month up front," I said, pushing it back. "Not 3. This isn't a trap, a tiny pause. People who've been cornered move with pauses." She nodded. There was a pale band on her ring finger where something expensive used to sit, the skin trained by metal and suddenly asked to forget. Her eyes scanned the room without turning her head, clocking exits, counting chances. I pretended not to notice. House rule, help first, questions later. We did the basics quick. "Rent is $450, I said. "Includes utilities and Wi-Fi, and the dad jokes are non-optional. Bathrooms down the hall. You'll share with Micah. I've got a half bath off my room. No smoking, no parties, no reptiles." I added that last one because a guy last week insisted his emotional support iguana wouldn't be a problem. "Understood," she said. "I'm Ari." The way she said it carried a soft pause after, like she'd almost said something else. "Micah," my kid offered, sticking out a hand solemnly, "if you move in, you have to like cartoons. And not step on the spaceship I'm building on the rug." "I can try both," she said, and this time the smile reached her eyes for half a second before vanishing like a shy animal. I showed her the spare room, cream walls, a narrow bed made with my grandmother's star quilt, a little dresser whose drawers didn't quite close on the left unless you pressed them with both thumbs. The window looked out over the yard where our pumpkin patch had failed spectacularly, but made every squirrel in the neighborhood a believer. Ari stood just inside the room and put her fingers on the quilt like she was learning a new language by touch. "It's perfect," she said too quickly, like the universe might revoke it if she took time to be honest. "You can make it yours," I said, "if you're definitely interested." "I am." The words were a little fierce. "Thank you." Back in the kitchen, her backpack sat half unzipped on a chair. I didn't mean to look, and I'm not the snooping type. But a corner of a leather notebook showed under the flap, embossed with a clean silver crest. A V nested inside a circle. I'd seen it on billboards, in airport lounges, on looped business news. Vail Industries. Software. Satellites. Security contracts. The kind of company that can make a city remember who's in charge. I rinsed bowls as if I hadn't seen a thing. She zipped the bag without comment. Outside, the SUV purred like a cat pretending it isn't interested. "You can shower, sleep," I said. "We'll sort the rest in the morning." "Thank you," she said, like the word cost something and she was paying anyway. I tucked Micah in with 2 stories, the brave mouse and the lost kite. The house went quiet in that deep, layered way. Fridge hum, distant pipes, rain softening like a confession. I should have slept. Instead, I walked to the window and let the blind slat fall with a finger's width gap. The SUV was still there, hood beating, windshield black. I told myself it was a neighbor's guest, a rideshare driver on break, anything but what my gut whispered, attention. I woke before the alarm to the feeling that the whole place had paused to listen. At 6, I was in the kitchen making pancakes from mix, the cheap kind that go rubbery unless you doctor them with cinnamon and a mashed banana. I doctored them. Micah trundled in, rubbing his eyes. Ari followed a few minutes later, wearing borrowed sweats and a careful face. She stopped at the threshold like she was checking if she still had permission to be alive. "You don't have to make breakfast for me," she said. "I made too many," I lied easily. "It's illegal to waste pancakes." She took a bite, blinked. "You cook like someone who's been short on time and long on love?" "Rude," I said, but I smiled despite myself. If you've never watched trust assemble itself out of small domestic things, you might not understand what happened next. It wasn't lightning, it was 100 tiny clicks. Ari washed dishes without being asked. She folded laundry like my grandmother, edges aligned, corners squared like promises. She learned where we kept the spare trash bags and the cereal bowls and the glue sticks. When I said, "It's a kid house," she heard, "Your presence has to help." And she met me there in a way that felt less like obligation and more like relief. And with Micah, she didn't just fill the silence, she listened. When he told her about a boy at school who wouldn't let him shoot the basketball, she didn't say ignore him or be nice. She asked, "What does your stomach feel like when you see him?" He said, "Like bees." She nodded like this was data worth respecting. "So what would being brave look like, not what would winning look like?" He told her. The next day he tried it. "You a teacher?" I asked one evening when I came back from a rideshare shift and found them on the living room rug, building a city out of cardboard boxes and bottle caps. Ari had drawn roads, crosswalks, a park with a crudely beautiful tree. "No," she said, eyes soft. "I just like when little people feel big." "Same," I said, and meant it. She kept her story trimmed short. "Between jobs," she said, "have savings." She didn't flash cards or IDs. If she had them, she didn't want to use them. She asked if I knew anyone hiring for honest work. Coffee shop, bookstore, daycare. I gave her a half-dozen places. She wrote them down in a small notebook with no crest, the kind you buy at a corner store with a wire spiral that catches on sweaters. We grocery shopped that Friday, the three of us. I reached for the store brand spaghetti and she didn't flinch. When we got to the checkout, she slid bills from a plain envelope. Not the thick fancy one from the first night. This was normal paper, edges frayed from being touched too much. She counted the money fast, fingers sure, like someone who knows how to make cash go quiet. On the way out, she handed Micah the receipt. "You are chief budget officer," she said. "Your job is to circle anything that costs more than $3 and tell us if it was worth it." He took the title like a knight takes a sword. Later, when I pulled the receipt out of my pocket, I found his circles and a margin note in Ari's small hand. Worth equals tasted plus shared, plus will still be good tomorrow. She made dinner that night, rice and beans and garlic carrots, and somehow it tasted like more than the sum of it. She cooked the way she moved, economical, careful, humble, and somehow precise. If you didn't know food could be kind, you'd have learned it at my table that night. "Thank you," I said when the dishes were stacked to dry. I don't say it lightly. She took the words like a sip of water. "Thank you," she returned, glancing toward the hall where Micah was singing off-key to his toothbrush. "For letting me be here." "You're paying," I reminded her. "Money is the smallest part of belonging," she said almost to herself. It should have stayed that simple. But nothing stays simple when the past wants a seat at your table. Saturday morning, I changed the oil on my car in the driveway while Micah narrated every step like a sports announcer. Ari brought out paper towels and a glass of water without being asked. A black sedan rolled by slow, different from the SUV. This one's slimmer, tinted deeper than most. I wouldn't have clocked it if not for the way Ari's shoulders sharpened. She didn't turn her head, just set the glass down and folded the paper towels very carefully into quarters, like she was reminding her hands they had a job. "You all right?" I asked. "Beautiful day," she said, which is what people say when the weather is the only safe truth. That afternoon, she took the bus to fill out applications. She came back with a handful of "will call yous" and one trial shift at a coffee shop that paid in tips the first week. She was almost smiling when she told me. It looked like a new habit she was trying on. "Good, I said. "They'll be lucky to have you." She made a small noise you make when you want to accept a compliment, but your history won't quite let you. Sunday, I caught her reorganizing the pantry. She stopped like she'd been caught stealing. I should have asked. Nah, I said. This is better. The beans were plotting a coup on the top shelf anyway. She laughed, quiet and surprised. I used to, well, never mind, used to what? I asked before I could stop myself. Used to have a whole kitchen staff, she said lightly, then added even lighter. On TV, cooking shows. I like to pretend I learned from them a joke, but not a joke. A breadcrumb she could deny if I pressed. I didn't. That night after Micah fell into the sleep of boys who raced scooters too hard, I found Ari at the table with her plain notebook open. Her hands were bandaged at the heels, small blisters, where straps had rubbed raw. Not laborer's hands, but not soft either. Hands in the middle of learning a new job. You're safe here, I said. I don't know why I said it then, only that the sentence had been building behind my teeth for days. She looked up, surprised. That's not a promise most people should make. I'm not most people, I said, and instantly felt foolish. She studied me for a long second. You say things you mean, she said finally. I'm trying to remember how to trust that. We weren't anything yet, not even friends, not exactly. But there are moments when the distance between strangers shortens by a measurable inch, and I felt one then, like a rail line clicking closer. On Monday, the SUV came back. I noticed it when I took the trash out after dinner, the air damp with the kind of mist that wants to be rain when it grows up. Parked 2 houses down under the willow, same no-light posture, the quiet hum of a patient engine. I pretended not to see it, the way you pretend not to see a wasp when you're trying not to spook it. Ari noticed too. Of course she did. She closed the living room curtains an hour earlier than usual. When she went to shower, she carried her backpack into the bathroom with her. Micah didn't notice anything. He told me at length about a paper airplane tournament at recess and how he and his friend Caden had invented a new fold called the Comet. I told him it sounded aerodynamic, and he looked at me like I'd used magic. After he was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the bills, pretending the math would come out different if I was gentle enough with it. Ari came in wearing the borrowed sweats and the calm face she wore like a uniform. We made tea we didn't need and didn't drink. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was braced. What would you do? She asked finally. If someone from a life you didn't want anymore tried to pull you back? Depends who, I said, and whether the life I have now would be hurt if I let them inside. She breathed out, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. You're good at this. At what? At not asking questions you're not ready to know answers to. House rule, I said again. We keep those. She nodded. For now. We washed the 2 clean mugs we hadn't used and put them back in the cabinet, because sometimes doing a thing from start to finish feels like winning. The house settled. The fridge kicked on. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing and then apologized to the night. At 10:42 p.m., somebody knocked. Not the hesitant tap from that first night. A firm, practiced knock from knuckles that don't ask twice. 3 beats, a pause, 2 more. I felt it in the floorboards. Ari's eyes went wide, green going dark. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just took a single step backward, like she was making space for the past to come through. Micah blessedly slept like a stone. I stood, my chair legs whispering over the tile, and crossed the small living room that has seen everything I am. I put my hand on the deadbolt but didn't turn it. Do you want me to open it? I asked her. She swallowed. Her throat worked like a bird against a cage. It doesn't matter what I want, she said very quietly. Not to them. It matters here, I said. Then I turned the lock. I opened the door to find 2 men in dark suits standing on my porch, rain beating on expensive wool. Behind them, the SUV idled like a loyal dog. Between the suits stood a third man in an overcoat, silver hair neat despite the weather, eyes so certain of their own reflection they didn't bother to find mine. Good evening, he said, as if this were normal, as if my house were an office, and I had a receptionist he'd charmed already. We're looking for Aria Vale. I didn't look back at Ari. Looking back would have given them something. I held the door, felt the cool, damp air reaching past me into my warm rooms, and said the first true thing that came to me. No Aria here, I said. You've got the wrong house. The silver-haired man let the words sit between us like a game piece he'd seen placed 1,000 times and always moved past. "Mr. Carter," he said, my name like a note he'd rehearsed, "let's not do this on the porch." He tipped his head just enough to suggest the next move was mine, just enough to remind me he was accustomed to being obeyed. And behind me, I heard Ari's breath catch on that other name, the one she hadn't given me. Aria. Vale. If I'd known who she really was the first night, the daughter of Victor Vale, the city's most watched and least questioned CEO, I might have double-locked the door and pretended I wasn't home. I didn't. I stepped forward instead, rain needling my face, keeping my body between the men and the life we were trying, slowly, carefully, to build. What do you say when power knocks at your door in the middle of the night and calls the person under your roof by a name she hasn't given you? I didn't look back at her. Looking would have given them a map. I kept my body in the gap, rain sneaking around my shoulders into the warmth of our small living room. "No area here," I said. "Wrong house." The silver-haired man, perfect coat, perfect calm, watched my mouth like he was assessing a product. "Mr. Carter," he said, my name fitting his tongue too well, "let's not do this on the porch." "Let's," I answered. "The kid's asleep." The two men flanking him were the kind you hire when you want people to mistake muscle for certainty. They shifted a fraction, enough to remind me there were two of them and one of me. The SUV idled a soft, patient growl at the curb. Behind me, I heard the tiniest sound, cloth brushing drywall, as Ari steadied herself. "Aria," the man said, not raising his voice, not needing to. "Come out where I can see you." She stepped forward until she was just behind my shoulder. When she spoke, her voice was low but not small. "I go by Ari," she said, "and I'm not going anywhere with you." The man's eyes softened the way winter sunlight pretends to be warm. "Names are costumes. You and I both know that. What do you want?" I asked. He reached into his coat with the deliberate slowness of someone who knows the choreography of fear. He pulled a card and held it up between two fingers. I didn't take it. He set it on my porch rail like he was leaving a seed for a bird. "Victor Vale," it read, black type on heavy stock. The V in a circle crest embossed like a thumbprint on a throat. "I want a conversation," he said. "Not with you. With my daughter." "Then you should have tried dinner 6 months ago," Ari said. He blinked once, the first crack in a sheet of tempered glass. "Aria," he said quietly, and I heard a father in it, buried under CEO. "This is not safe. For you. For the child in the next room. There are people who—" She stepped out from behind me then, just one pace, and I felt the air shift with her decision. "There are always people," she said. "I've learned how to be one of them. You sent men to follow me across these state lines to prove you care? That's not care. That's control with better shoes." Something like pain crossed his face and disappeared, replaced by that boardroom patience. "Come home," he said. "We can talk where the walls don't listen." "These walls do more than listen," I said. "They protect. Here's the policy. Anyone entering my house does it with my consent and hers." The taller of the two suits finally spoke. The word "sir" sanded thin by prep schools. "Mr. Vale, we can secure the—" "No," Victor said without looking at him. He studied me again, which is always the moment powerful men decide how much to spend on you. "How much is the rent?" he asked. "You're not buying my house," I said. "Not the house," he said. "The space she's occupying. I'll pay you triple market rate to terminate your agreement." Tonight I heard my bank account lean forward like a dog that's learned what the treat jar means. I didn't move. "Her tenancy isn't for sale," I said. "Neither is my word." He gave me a long, almost bored moment to revise myself. When I didn't, he adjusted his cuff, which probably cost more than my car. "You do handyman work, don't you?" he said. "A man of your skills could use a better truck. Tools, insurance. I'm offering you an exit from numbers that don't like you." "I'll take my chances with math," I said. "You can keep your charity wrapped in chains." Ari stood so quiet I might have thought she was gone if I hadn't felt the charge of her there, like a weather system pinned to a horizon. "Dad," she said at last, the word brittle and careful, I'm not a shareholder you can strong-arm. I'm not your press release. I am not going back. His gaze flicked to the room beyond me. The modest furniture, the Lego battlefield, the drawing on the fridge where Micah had colored outside every line on purpose. For a fraction, something human changed the angle of his mouth. He straightened it away. Then, he said, you need to hear me. The man I asked you to meet, the man you decided I would marry, she cut in, to keep a contract warm, is not the one who worries me anymore. He breathed out, clouding the cold. He is angry now. Not because he lost you, because he thinks he lost leverage. Angry men with access to money do stupid things, Arya. Men who don't like being told no look for smaller yeses. Then maybe don't make deals with them, she said gently, and that gentleness made it land twice as hard. The shorter suit shifted again. We're attracting attention, he murmured. From down the block, a porch light snapped on. A curtain moved. The city was already writing its story about us. Victor stepped back one pace, the rain rounding his hair silver. I'll have my office reach out to you, Mr. Carter, he said, like we were scheduling a termite inspection. In the meantime, Miss Vale, please accept the reality that your safety is not a feeling. Allow my team to station a car on the corner. They will not engage unless you request it. No cars, Ari said. Arya, he said, that name again soft, involuntary. I would rather have your contempt than your obituary. He tipped his head, a bow not to me, but to whatever rules he believed still bound us, and turned. The suits turned with him as if hinged. The SUV's lights woke, washed my porch in polite daylight for half a second, then wheeled away. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood until the house stopped feeling like a held breath. Sorry, Ari said at last. For what? I asked, turning. For the hurricane. Not your hurricane, I said. You didn't choose the ocean. We made tea we did not need and drank it this time because doing something with our hands made our heads quieter. After a while, I asked, is your last name Vale, or is that just a Crest you liked? She almost smiled. It's real. My mother's maiden name, which my father turned into a brand after she died. It made family look like a strategy. We sat with that. The fridge hummed. Pipes whispered. In the next room, Micah turned over in sleep and sighed like he was negotiating with a dragon in a dream. I should tell you the parts that matter, she said. Not all of it. Just enough so you know what's at your door. House rule, I said. We do enough. She folded her hands around the mug and spoke like she was arranging chess pieces she knew too well. I ran operations for a philanthropy arm that looked generous on paper. Scholarships, neighborhood broadband, makerspaces for schools. The board wanted ribbon cuttings. I wanted access that worked. We fought every quarter. Then Dad cut a deal with his friend, Atlas North, that would put their son on our board. The son wanted me attached to the contract in a more permanent way. You said no. I said I'd quit. Dad said I was being dramatic. The Atlas son, Thomas, laughed. He told my father he'd tame me. She looked at her hands. I didn't like being described as livestock. So you left, I said. I tried to leave quietly, changed my cards, took out cash, disappeared between meetings. She nodded toward the hallway. Found this listing. Walked in the rain so the tracking apps would look like static. Your father found you anyway. He always does. It's what he's built for. Do you think Thomas, the Atlas guy, wants to hurt you? I think he wants to not lose, she said, which sometimes looks the same. We wrote down practical things on the back of an electric bill because survival likes a list. If anyone tried to enter without consent, we'd call 911. If the SUV returned, we'd note plates, times. I'd pick up a cheap camera for the porch, not because cameras stop wolves, but because they make wolves pick different doors. She'd take only the front half of the bus to and from the trial shift at the coffee shop and vary her route. She'd keep her phone in airplane mode except when she needed it. Feels like a lot, she said finally, eyes bright with a kind of tired that lives behind the eyes. Sorry. We practice until it feels like normal, I said. Then we practice something better. Why are you like this? She asked, and there was no accusation in it, just curiosity. Because someone was like this for me once, I said, surprised to hear it out loud. After Micah's mom left, my grandmother, she put chickens in soup and duct tape and love between me and disaster until I could do it myself. I owe that forward. She nodded like that fact fit in her map. Okay, she said. Forward. The week pivoted around the quiet decision that she would not run. Tuesday, she started her trial shift at the coffee shop on Harbor and 3rd. I drove her early and parked across the street with Micah in the back seat, eating dry cereal from a cup like field rations. The shop's windows were fogged with human weather. Baristas moved in choreographed urgency. Ari tied on an apron with a grace that looked like competence without applause. I watched her learn the register in 3 customers, memorize the printer codes in 8, soothe a man who wanted oat milk as if his day depended on it. Maybe it did. An hour in, a woman in a camel coat stared at Ari too long, phone held hip high like a mirror. My chest went tight. The woman snapped a photo and turned away. Ari never looked up, but I saw the way her hands paused 1 beat longer on the milk pitcher. Then she was motion again. Dad, Micah said, breath white on the window. Is she doing good? She's making the whole place better, I said, and it was true. At noon, I walked in and ordered 2 grilled cheese and a small hot chocolate with extra whipped cream for the chief budget officer. Ari slid the hot chocolate across the counter to Micah with a conspirator's wink. On me, she said, but you have to list it as marketing. Marketing, he repeated, reverent. We went home. I changed oil on the neighbor's car for $40, which would become groceries, become dinners, become leftovers, become lunches, become a week. The SUV didn't return that day. That felt like sunshine. I didn't trust sunshine. Wednesday, she came home with a little envelope of tips and the kind of tired that feels like pride. She counted the ones on the counter with that fast, neat precision, then slid half across the laminate to me. Nope, I said, pushing it back. House rule. I live in the house, she pointed out. I make rules too. Fine, I said, dividing the pile into thirds. Rent, groceries, emergency. She raised an eyebrow. Emergency is things you don't plan for but happen anyway. I tucked that third into a jar behind the cereal. Like broken fan belts, surprise field trips, men at your door in the rain. She smiled, small and tired and real, and reached for a pen to label the jar emergency in neat block letters that somehow made the word less scary. Thursday afternoon, a courier knocked while I was fixing the closet door that liked to moon the hallway uninvited. Ari answered. For Ms. Aria Vale, the courier said, amused at his own importance. She signed. He left. The envelope's paper had that sleek, expensive weight that makes you feel poor, even if your wallet is fine. Inside, a letter on Pritchard and Bloom letterhead, a law firm whose name shows up in articles where rich people fix what laws break. It was written to Ms. Aria Vale, a.k.a. Ari Hart, the a.k.a. printed like a smirk, and said in gentle legalese that continued occupancy at the above address posed unacceptable security liabilities, that her sponsors required immediate consultation, and that failure to comply would result in appropriate remedies at Law and Equity, which is how money says please and thank you with its hands around your throat. There was also a temporary protection plan agreement authorizing Vale Security to secure perimeter access and monitor ingress/egress. They want to park their eyes on the street, I said. They want to remind me there is no street they don't own, she said. I took photos, not because I thought my phone was safer than paper, but because documentation is a kind of courage. That evening, while spaghetti boiled, store brand, $2, worth circled, there was another knock, softer this time, calculated to sound harmless. I opened the door to a different man in a different suit, sleeker, smile fitted like teeth. No SUV behind him. A dark coupe idled neat at the curb. Mr. Carter, he said, offering a hand I didn't take. Evan Cole, I represent Atlas North. Thomas asked me to deliver a message personally to Miss Vale. She's not accepting deliveries, I said. Then perhaps you can pass this along. He held out another envelope. The paper was the same expensive lie. It's a non-disparagement and confidentiality agreement tailored to protect all parties. Very standard like a muzzle, I said. He smiled as if we'd shared a joke. Also a reminder that certain items in Miss Vale's possession remain the property of Atlas. Devices, documents, notebooks. My gaze flicked very briefly to Aries' backpack on the chair. If he noticed, his smile didn't change. And, he added, a goodwill gesture. He held up a second envelope. A stipend for your inconvenience. It's not inconvenient to treat people like people, I said. Everything has a cost, he said pleasantly. Atlas is prepared to meet it. In return, we ask for cooperation, failing which we will be forced to explore avenues that are, how to put this, less comfortable for everyone. You threatening me in my doorway, Evan? I asked, stepping half a foot forward just to see if his shoes liked rain. His smile thinned. I'm explaining realities. Men like us don't often get invited into rooms where decisions are made. I'm here to invite you. We have enough rooms, and I said, good night. He adjusted his tie, which was more expensive than my month's rent. Please consider that you are responsible for the safety of a child, he said. Soft, low, poison disguised as care. Pressure tends to break weakest points. Like your windshield if you don't leave my porch, I said, pulse a drum. The smile slid off his face like a coat. He retreated one step, then another. I'll report that you declined goodwill, he said. Atlas prefers goodwill. Atlas can prefer whatever it likes somewhere else, I said, and closed the door. I stood there with my palm flat on the wood, feeling the hum of the house. Micah's voice from the hallway asking if the spaghetti was ready. Aries' quiet movement as she gathered breath and resolve. Who was it? She asked. A man who sells other people's air, I said. She looked at the envelopes on the table and didn't touch them. I'm sorry, she said again, and there was anger in it now, but not at me. He's Thomas's fixer. He thinks people are levers. He enjoys pulling. We're not levers, I said. We're trees. Trees get cut, she said. They also grow. We ate spaghetti. We washed plates. We read a chapter about a rabbit who builds a house out of things that don't look like house things at first. Micah fell asleep on the rug, and I carried him to bed, listening to his breath change against my shoulder. When I came back, Ari was at the table with the plain notebook, the corner store one, drawing a little map of our block and marking X's like a strategist who refuses to be only a target. The phone on the counter buzzed, the number on Victor's card. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. Please, Aria, not coercion, conversation. Noon tomorrow. The picture attached was the coffee shop on Harbor and 3rd, taken from across the street. The caption, we can meet somewhere you are comfortable. He's learning, I said. He's negotiating with God, she said, using heaven's stationery. Do you want to meet him? I asked. She stared at the photo of the shop's fogged windows. If I don't, she said, they escalate. If I do, they think the tactics worked. What do you want? I asked. Not what do they want you to want? She held the question like a fragile thing. I want him to see me, she said finally, not his plan. Then let's make it a meeting you can leave whenever you want, I said. Public, daylight, in a corner where the security cameras see him. Not just you, she breathed out. Okay. I texted back from my phone. Noon. Window table. You come alone. We leave if anyone else approaches. He replied with a single checkmark emoji, which is how rich men say I have already planned a dozen contingencies. Before sleep, I moved a chair under the front doorknob, not because chairs stop men with ambitions, but because chairs tell your body it tried. I lay awake long after the house had put itself away. In the morning, the rain had rinsed the sky clean. I dropped Micah at school with extra kisses, the kind he rolls his eyes at in public and keeps in his pocket anyway. Ari wore jeans and a cedar-colored sweater she'd found at the thrift store for $4. She looked like anyone, which is to say, she looked like herself without permission. At 11:58, we took the table by the window. I ordered her tea, myself black coffee I wouldn't finish. At 12:03, Victor Vale walked in alone, without suits, in a navy jacket that made him look almost like a man rather than a headline. The barista didn't recognize him. That felt important. He sat. He didn't reach for her hands. He didn't look at me like I was furniture. Micro changes. Maybe nothing. Maybe the start of something. Thank you, he said. We leave if you start playing chess, Ari said. He managed half a smile. Then we may finish this quickly, he said. But he didn't move a single piece. He told her things he should have told months ago, about threats that had come in under press releases, about partners who thought silence was a service. He admitted he'd hired men to tail her. He didn't call it stalking. He called it protection, which is what men call control when they've run out of synonyms. She told him things he'd never bothered to hear, about the way rooms felt when he entered, about how people bent themselves to match his certainty and called it loyalty, about the way charity had to be more than a camera's angle, or else it was laundering, not love. He asked to bring security back to the corner. She said no. He asked to assign a driver for now. She said she'd take the bus. He asked to speak to the child, to reassure himself my son was safe. I said that wouldn't happen. Around us milk frothed, cups clinked. A dog barked outside like he had opinions. It felt almost like normal life. It wasn't. They were getting to the why now. Why Thomas? Why Atlas? When Victor's gaze shifted past Ari's shoulder toward the door. His jaw compressed one click. I turned. Thomas Atlas walked in like a press conference. Two men in trim suits ghosted in behind him. He saw Ari. He smiled the way people smile at things they think they own. Don't, Victor said under his breath, but Thomas was already crossing the floor, apologies owed to no one. Aria, he said as if the syllables were something sweet he deserved, you made me chase you. That wasn't very kind. Ari sat very still, the way you sit when you refuse to flinch. I didn't ask for kindness, she said. Just distance. He ignored that and looked at me as if I were a hazard on a golf course. And you must be the landlord, he said. Thank you for your service. We'll take it from here. He reached for Ari's wrist with fingers that had never missed a handshake. I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my hand between his fingers and her wrist. Don't, I said, and the word wasn't loud, but it had weight. The room heard it. The espresso machine hissed behind us like a cat deciding which way to jump. Thomas Atlas blinked, surprised that physics didn't bend in his direction. The two suits behind him fanned wider by a shoulder width, a quiet rehearsal of options. Then Victor Vale stood, not in front of me to take over, not behind me to disown it, shoulder to shoulder like two studs in a frame. Thomas, Victor said, and there was steel under his civility. Take your hands off my daughter. Now Thomas laughed a small, disbelieving laugh meant for the cameras that were now phones. The barista, nose ring, nerves of string, had her thumb hovering over something underneath the counter. The manager in a flour-dusted apron was already dialing. The whole shop held its breath and pretended to sip. Victor, Thomas said, this is family business. You know how that goes. Victor didn't look away. It becomes my business when you lay a hand on her. It becomes the city's when you bring muscle into a cafe. Ari didn't flinch, didn't fold. She set both palms flat on the table, pushed her chair back deliberately, and stood. You don't own me, she said to Thomas, each word set down like a stone you can step on. You never did. And you won't talk to him, she tipped her chin at me, like a delivery boy you can tip to make disappear. Thomas's smile emptied by a degree. Look at you, he said softly. New costume, new lines, same stage. Wrong show, she said. Wrong audience. He glanced at Victor again, calculating, then at the phones tilted like sunflowers. He did the thing men like him do when a room doesn't bend. He changed the subject to a ledger. Ms. Vale is in possession of proprietary materials, he recited, finding shelter in legalese. Devices and documents belonging to Atlas North. A notebook, for instance. I didn't look at her bag. I didn't breathe. Return requests go through counsel, Victor said, not sidewalk theater. And yet here we are, Thomas said, leaning just enough to test me again without touching her. Mr. Carter, is it? You seem like a practical man. Do you understand that what you're doing is, how shall I put it, expensive? I thought about brake pads and field trip forms and the electric bill with its numbers like teeth. I understand that a door is a promise, I said. You're not coming through mine. Sirens wailed somewhere close. Not a threat. A clock. Thomas's grin flicked off like a light. You can't protect her, he said, quiet, meant for me alone. Not from time. Not from the fact that everyone has a price. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. But we set ours. Today, mine is this. Leave the police arrived in a gust of cold and authority, shoulders squared against the push of 1,000 similar afternoons. Two officers, one older, one with a rookie's jawline, took in the suits, the phones, the faces. The manager met them halfway, finger stabbing toward Thomas, toward us, toward the camera shaped like a ceiling dome that had been blinking red since the first bad idea. Afternoon, the older cop said, looking at no one and everyone. We're going to start by lowering volumes and ending touching. There was no touching, Thomas lied easily. There was almost touching, the barista said, loud enough to be useful. And there were vibes. Would anyone like to make a statement? The rookie asked, pulling out a pad like language could tame it. Yes, Victor said. And for the first time since he'd walked in, he looked not like a CEO but like a father who has chosen a hill. I would. I'm Victor Vale. That man is Thomas Atlas. He followed my daughter here with 2 private security contractors, contrary to her express request. He attempted to initiate physical contact against her will. There are ongoing civil matters which will be resolved in court, not here. For now, we'd like him removed. Thomas's suits had gone very still, hard drives in sleep mode waiting for commands. Thomas stared at Victor with that peculiar mixture of outrage and awe, rich boys reserved for the first person who tells them no in public. You're making a mistake, Thomas said. Our companies, Victor interrupted, have terminated all exploratory agreements as of now. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You will receive written notice within the hour. Shock changed Thomas's face by micro-degrees. First confusion, then calculation, then an anger that rearranged his features into something less handsome and far more honest. You'd tank a deal over what? Over this performance? Over a barista bunker? Victor didn't look away. Over my daughter, he said. Over the fact that you treat people like contracts and care about compliance more than consent. Leave the officers understood a closed chapter when they heard one. They escorted Thomas and his suits out with that gentle firmness good cops use to keep rooms from breaking. As he passed, Thomas leaned slightly toward me, like he was smelling whether I was worth the trouble. This isn't over, he murmured. I didn't think it was, I said. Nothing important ever is. He stepped into the cold. The door shut. The room exhaled so hard the windows fogged. You all right? The older cop asked Ari, and to his credit, he asked like he really meant the answer. She nodded once. Yes, I'd like to file a report, she added, like someone who has chosen to be real in public. And I'd like a copy of the footage. We can do that, he said. Manager? Already on a thumb drive, the manager said, vindicated by competence. And there's a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls for whoever needs to feel human again. They took statements. We drank tea that had long gone cold. Victor sat with folded hands and didn't direct anything. That might have been the strangest part. Outside, the sun reached through clouds and found the window, turned the table into a small stage where no one was acting. I'll have counsel prepare a cease and desist, Victor said eventually, and a protective order, if you want it. I do, Ari said. On my terms. He nodded. On yours. He turned to me. Thank you. You don't have to, I said and meant it. I do, he said, and for once the words didn't sound like currency. For standing in spaces I should have filled sooner. We set the next pieces like people who finally understood the game wasn't chess after all. It was a neighborhood project with 1,000 hands. Ari would return any item clearly belonging to Atlas that she didn't need for her own legal defense, on a schedule set by her attorney, with a chain of custody that would make a prosecutor blush. Victor would withdraw his failings from our block and replace them with something quieter and more radical. Trust. If he felt compelled to protect her, he could fund the coffee shop's new security cameras and the shelter down the street where Ari had spent her first 2 nights in hiding. No names, no press. We left with 2 copies of the footage, a police incident number, and a cinnamon roll in a bag because sugar is sometimes a bridge you carry in your pocket for later. Home felt like a warm bucket. I poured myself into it. Micah came barreling out of school at 3 with a painting of a lopsided tree and a son he'd given sunglasses because Even the sun needs protection. He asked if the meeting went okay, the way kids ask about whether they can feel through the walls. It went, I said. We're okay. Did she win? He asked, meaning Ari, meaning us. She didn't lose, I said. Sometimes that's how winning starts. We tightened the edges of our life without turning it into a fortress. I mounted a camera over the porch with a little blue eye that blinked friendlier than a guard. The neighbors on either side, Miss Lee with her front yard roses and Mr. Ortiz with his garage band and old school gossip, is the blood of community, added our numbers to their phones and made a game of suspicious cars. The coffee shop hung a small sign by the register that said, "Be kind or be quiet," which is a policy I can get behind in any war. The legal things churned like weather you learn to dress for. A temporary restraining order against Thomas became a longer one. Atlas's fixer sent 3 more letters that said different words in the same voice. Our attorney, a woman who wore sneakers to court and had the jaw of someone who lifts her own furniture, translated them into the kind of English you can sleep with in the room. Victor kept his promise. He cut Atlas loose, ate the stock dip without calling it martyrdom, and redirected his press machine not at his pain, but at policy, consent clauses in partnership agreements, independent oversight for philanthropy arms, a public pledge to decouple his daughter's name from his brand. Press loved repentance. Ari didn't. She chose silence with her name on it, and a life louder than a headline. She worked mornings at the coffee shop and afternoons helping me turn the handyman hustle into something with a front door. We called it Juniper Works because the juniper out front had stood through 8 winters without asking permission. She redesigned my invoices so they didn't look like apologies. She built a spreadsheet that made money behave. Micah got a notebook labeled Inventions, where he drew tools that didn't exist yet. A ladder that could talk you out of dumb ideas, a paint roller that remembered where you stopped, a hammer that made a sound like a compliment when you hit the nail clean. One Saturday, we took the failing pantry at Miss Lee's place and turned it into shelves that didn't kink under the weight of real food. Ari measured twice every time. I cut once and twice anyway. Micah handed screws like a nurse in an operating room. When we were done, Miss Lee cried and pressed spring rolls into our hands until we had to leave or drown in kindness. A month later, Juniper Works had a wait list, a logo Micah drew that looked like a house with arms, and a new column in the spreadsheet labeled Gives. Ari insisted on it. Every 5 jobs, we did one for someone who needed it more than we needed the money. She found those someones without making them feel found out. Some part of her had always been good at this, using the complicated map in her head to steer resources toward people the city trains itself not to see. Victor came by once, announced by the soft crunch of a car that didn't cost as much as it could have. He stood in the doorway, like a man who remembered the rules of a door. He had a paper bag with 3 fresh light bulbs, a token offering with the awkward sincerity of a man trying to metabolize humility. "I hear you needed these," he said and held them up, and we let him change the bulb in the hall like that job mattered today. He watched us measure a baseboard. He did not give advice. When he left, he put his card on my fridge only after I nodded. Under Victor Vale, he'd written in green ink, "Father, not CEO. Boundaries like studs hold houses up." The black SUV didn't come back. Sometimes a dark sedan would idle under the willow and then pull away when a jogger glanced twice. The porch camera blinked blue and tired and mostly bored. At dinner, we created a new rule. 1 routine thing, 1 brave thing. Routine was floss, homework, sweeping the floor. Brave was calling a contractor to negotiate a price, telling a customer we couldn't start until Thursday, asking the librarian for a book you were embarrassed to want. Micah said his brave thing was raising his hand, even when he wasn't completely sure. Ari's brave was wearing her own last name in places where it used to feel like a trap. Mine was saying no to jobs that would make us bend in ways that would break us. When spring shouldered winter aside, our yard woke up like it had been listening. Micah and I planted 2 new pumpkin seeds because we refused to learn some lessons the first time. And Ari drew a simple rectangle in the dirt by the fence and called it a garden because naming something is how you force the future to show up on time. We watched things try. That's a holy act. It wasn't tidy, nothing true is. Some nights I woke with the old math gnawing and lay in the washing machine dark while the house clicked and settled. Some mornings Ari went very quiet, like words were expensive and she was over budget. We didn't fix each other. We fed each other and let time do its slow work. On the day the court made the restraining order permanent, we went to the park, bought snow cones that turned our tongues into flags, and did nothing ceremonial because life itself was ceremony enough. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a link I didn't click for half a block. When I did, it was Victor, live at a dais, announcing a new policy that gave employees at Vail the right to refuse any engagement with partners or clients that blurred personal and professional lines without fear of retaliation. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. He said the word consent like a man learning how to hold a fragile dish without thinking about his price. That night, Ari sat on the porch steps with Micah beside her. They watched the sky change colors like it was practicing for something. Micah leaned against her shoulder the way kids do with dogs and people they trust. "I like this part," he said, "when the day doesn't know if it's over." "It's not over," she said, and kissed the top of his head. "We're just turning the page." When summer arrived in earnest, kids chalking galaxies on sidewalks, nights that smell like cut grass and far-off barbecues, I found myself stopping in doorways to look at them in rooms like a man checking on a pie in the oven. Not to interfere, to marvel at transformation. On a Thursday, Ari came home from the coffee shop with a flyer for a community center 2 blocks over. They were trying to turn an unused classroom into a makerspace. Cheap laptops, donated 3D printer, shelves for kids to build things that weren't for sale. She spread the flyer on our table and smoothed it flat with both palms. "I want to help," she said, "with the real stuff. Tables that don't wobble, outlets that don't spark, a whiteboard that erases all the way." "Sounds expensive," I said. "Sounds like worth," she said. "I can ask for funding." Not from him, from a grant, from quiet people with loud wallets who like proof more than press. We went that weekend. We brought a drill, a level, a stubbornness. We built tables that could take a beating. We painted a wall bright enough to wake sleepy ideas. Ari taught 3 kids how to wire a simple switch without blood or smoke. At the end of the day, the director, a woman with laugh lines like parentheses around her whole life, touched Ari's arm and said, "You're the kind of rich we don't get enough of." Ari laughed, startled. She understood. After the kids left, I found Ari alone in the supply closet, hand on a box of markers like she was checking for a pulse. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, eyes bright in the small light. "I spent years cutting ribbons for rooms like this," she said. "I didn't know they could feel like this from the inside." We went home with paint under our nails and a future under our ribs. We made pancakes for dinner because rules exist to be broken kindly. Micah fell asleep in the chair with a book on his chest, the page rising and falling like a tiny trampoline. Later, after the house juiced itself into quiet, we stood on the porch and watched the street be itself. The camera's blue eye blinked, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere a siren Dopplered past on its way to someone else who needed strangers to stand shoulder to shoulder for a minute. "Thank you," Ari said, eyes on the willow, not on me. "For what?" I asked. "For opening the door the night I knocked." She looked at me then, straight on. "For deciding I wasn't a storm. For teaching me a house can be a promise." "I didn't save you," I said, "because truth matters in the rooms you plan to live in. You walked yourself in. You chose to stay. I just kept the pancakes warm." She smiled the kind of smile you can build furniture out of. "I'm choosing still," she said. We didn't kiss. We didn't make vows to future ghosts of children not yet born. We did something more scandalous. We went inside and cleaned the kitchen together. 2 people making order after a good mess. 2 people proud of small domestic victories the world will never write think pieces about. When we finished, we turned off the light and let the dark come in like a friend who knows where everything goes. In the morning, the sun did its job. The pumpkin sent up 2 brave green curls. The email dinged with a note from the community center. Kids had already signed up for Build It, Break It, Fix It, the class Ari titled, and I wish I had. Victor texted a photo of a check made out to the center's general fund with a caption that said, "Just doing what should have been done." No signatures on our names. No applause. I dropped Micah at school with a kiss loud enough to embarrass him into laughing. I watched him run toward the door and thought, The math will still be hard, and we will still do it, and it will not kill us. Some nights I still think about the first knock, the way the rain argued with my porch, the way a girl held a backpack like a life vest and asked if a room could be a raft. Here is what I know now. You don't always see the chapter title when you turn the page. Sometimes you only know you've crossed into the next part because the house hums in a new key and the air smells like cinnamon and wet wool and the kind of hope that doesn't brag. People ask me, when they hear the story in the half-true way stories travel, if I knew who she was when she knocked, if I would have opened the door if I'd known the last name, the money, the men, the cameras, the letters with their long teeth. I tell them the only thing that matters. I didn't open the door for a millionaire's daughter. I opened it for a person who needed a place to stand while she chose herself. And in the choosing, she made a home that changed the locks on all our doors. What do you do when the city asks you to tell the truth about how you survived, knowing the man who tried to break you might be sitting in the front row? Spring unspooled into early summer, and our block learned a new rhythm. Coffee in the morning, drills in the afternoon. Micah chalking rocket ships on the sidewalk until the stars showed up to compare notes. Juniper Works had a 3-week wait list and a reputation for leaving places stronger than we found them. The community center's Makerspace, born of borrowed tools and stubbornness, was now full of kids who could say torque without giggling and who treated failure like a lab partner, not an enemy. That's when the email arrived from City Hall, a bland subject line that hit a pulse. Request to speak, Neighborhood Tech Night. They wanted a short talk from Ari Aval, operating as Ari Hart, about community safety, consent, and building things that last. No press push unless you authorize it, the staffer wrote. We're trying to learn, not headline. It felt like a door, small but real. Do you want it? I asked, sliding the laptop to her across our table with the 3-ring stains that never quite scrubbed out. I want to not want to hide, she said, then caught herself and smiled. That's a yes. We prepared the way we prepare shelves. Measure twice, cut once, sand the edges where hands will land. She wrote her points in the plain spiral notebook, not the leather one, in slanted letters that tightened when she cared. Consent is not a signature. It's a choice that repeats. Protection without permission is surveillance. A home is a promise, not a place. She practiced to Micah, who asked the questions only kids think to ask. What if a person says sorry? What if they mean it? What if they stop meaning it later? She didn't dodge. She told the truth and let it sit. 2 days before the event, a countersuit appeared from Atlas North, grim and polished. Tortious interference, this, misappropriation, that. A claim that a Vail notebook contained proprietary philanthropic frameworks. A phrase so perfectly smug, it made our attorney laugh out loud. We filed our own replies and slept anyway. You can't be ready for every weather, but you can keep a jacket by the door. The night of the talk, the council chambers smelled like floor polish and old arguments. Not a big crowd, 30, 40 neighbors, a scout troop with clipboards, a grandma knitting in defiance of the agenda, a handful of city staffers who looked like they lived on coffee and righteous emails. Victor arrived before it started and sat against the wall. No entourage, hands folded like the father of a recitalist. He nodded to me once. He didn't try to direct the evening. Progress sometimes looks like a man learning where to put his hands. I watched Ari step up to the little dais, a cedar sweater and steady voice, a person who used to be an asset slipping the leash of the word. She didn't mention last names. She didn't drag trophies of pain into the room to prove she'd been hurt. She talked about how safety starts with listening and how listening starts by deciding you are not the smartest person in the conversation. She said consent like it was a beautiful machine you could learn to build if you read the manual and respected the tolerances. She told them a house can be a promise, and that promises need maintenance. Bolts tightened, hinges oiled, a chair under the knob on the worst nights to tell your body it tried. Near the end, she asked us to do one brave thing we could repeat. Bravery that can't be repeated is just adrenaline, she said, the line Micah had helped her write. Choose the small brave you can do tomorrow. They clapped the way neighbors clap when one of their own does something hard in public. I felt taller without moving. Then Thomas walked in. He didn't belong to the room. He belonged to photographs. But there he was, expensive suit, jaw set to a number he assumed he could bill. Two men hovered behind him, like parentheses. He ignored the back row and strode down the side aisle as if stage directions had been sent to his phone. Victor stood, not blocking, not challenging, just standing where a father stands when the wind changes. I moved without thinking, a line drawing itself from the dais to the aisle to me. The nearest officer, working the event in a navy polo and a tired patience, clocked the restraining order faster than I could say it. Thomas kept walking until the officer stepped in. "Sir," she said, professional and flat, "you're within the restricted perimeter set by the court." "I'm here to exercise my right to attend a public meeting," he said, smiling for a camera that wasn't there. "And I'm here to exercise my right to keep the peace," she said. "This way." He looked past her at Ari like a boy peering through glass at a toy he can't understand. "We're not done," he said. Ari took a breath that I watched decide not to leave her body. "You're right," she said, calm as physics. "We're finished." They escorted him out. The doors swallowed his outline. No spectacle, no shouting, just the sound of a room choosing its own rules. A scout raised a hand and asked if philanthropic frameworks could be recycled. The room laughed, the kind of laugh that scrubs a space clean without pretending nothing happened. Ari finished her talk with a story about a teacher who made power by letting a class vote on which book they'd hate the least, and how that, somehow, had turned out to be the one they loved. When it was over, the knitting grandma pressed a peppermint into Ari's hand like a sacrament. "For your pocket," she said, "for the next time something sour tries to live in your mouth." The scout troop asked for a selfie with the brave lady. One of the clerks cried and pretended it was allergies. Victor stood with his hands still and his mouth soft, and in the small private way that mattered more than any podium, he said, "I'm proud of you," and didn't add a single term and condition. Life, being life, did not send a brass band. It sent more work. Juniper Works landed a contract rebuilding the rec center's locker room benches. Soggy, splintered, mean to knees. We ripped out rot and taught the kids who showed up how to plane without planing off their fingerprints. Ari's trial shift became a promotion. They put her in charge of the morning crew because the register liked behaving for her. A reporter emailed, kind, curious, persistent. Ari said no with thanks. The court set a hearing date to fold the restraining order into something with longer legs. Atlas kept lawyering like a weather report. Precipitation likely, visibility low. Their fixer, Evan, turned up at the community center one afternoon and accidentally got caught on camera, coaching a former Atlas contractor to remember the notebook as containing trade secrets. Our attorney sent the footage to the judge with a memo so sharp I could have used it to cut crown molding. The judge responded with sanctions that read like a red pen carving its way through a bad essay. In the middle of all that, the Makerspace held its first open night. The kids brought prototypes, a pencil that kept score for multiplication battles, a doorstop that sang when kicked, invented by a kid who wanted a gentler way to tell his mom he was home, a plant watering system made from IV tubing and stubbornness. Ari stood at the back, arms crossed to hold herself in place so her heart wouldn't knock her down. When the kid with the doorstop pressed play and the little chime went off, she wiped her eyes and blamed the sawdust we hadn't cleaned up enough. "Worth?" I asked quietly. "Worth," she said. I started noticing how the house had shifted. Not bigger, just truer. The wall by the kitchen door wore 3 new tiny dents at Micah height, where he'd attempted parkour on a dare. The porch camera blinked bored. That was new. The emergency jar behind the cereal had $20 bills stacked like a small fence. That felt like a miracle measured in paper. The leather notebook stayed zipped in the backpack unless our attorney asked to examine it. The plain spiral lived open on the table, its pages dense with lists that started with verbs: build, call, ask, return, teach, plant, answer, rest. One hot Saturday, we took down the old wobbly fence between our yard and Ms. Lou's and built a shared one straight and strong, leaving a gate in the middle wide enough to admit a wheelbarrow and a child carrying a universe. The neighborhood kids took turns with the post hole digger until their arms burned and their words got soft and honest. "I'm bad at holes," one announced. Ari knelt beside him. "You're good at stopping when you need to," she said. That's a skill most adults don't learn. After we hung the gate, Miss Lee brought out iced tea sweet enough to break rules and a plate of mangoes carved like swans. This is how boundaries should feel, she said, flicking the latch we'd set just loose enough for small hands. Not walls. Conversations. That night, when the heat broke and the sky shook down a sudden rain, I heard again the percussion of drops against our porch. The same drum as the night she knocked. I went to the door out of habit, not dread, and found only the street shining like a peeled fruit. I stood there and thought about 1,000 tiny choices that had delivered us to this exact doorway. The day I'd priced rent at a number I hoped wouldn't scare off a person who needed it. The moment she'd set the fancy envelope down and I'd slid it back. The inch I'd put between Thomas and Ari at the coffee shop. The word Victor had chosen, daughter, over the words his board liked better. We call big decisions turning points, but I think they're accumulations. Beads on a string that look like a circle only when you tie the knot. The court date arrived soft as paper and just as loud. Beige walls, humming lights, a judge who looked like she had a sense of humor she refused to bring to work. Atlas tried to sell their story in 3 binders. Our attorney sold ours in 10 words. Consent is not an asset. People are not leverage. The judge didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth rehearsed it. She extended the restraining order, slapped Atlas for discovery shenanigans, and scheduled a separate hearing on sanctions. Ms. Vale, she said at the end, is there anything you wish to add? Ari stood, looked at the room that had consumed months of her life, and chose the smallest brave. Yes, she said, I forgive the part of myself that thought I had to ask permission to leave. The stenographer's keys slowed for half a second. Some sentences refused to be reduced to letters. I held my breath and let it out very carefully. After court, we went to the little diner on Maple that still makes milkshakes so thick the straw stands up alone. Micah mixed chocolate and strawberry and called it Neapolitan chaos. Ari taught him to stack quarters on the lip of a glass without falling. Victor stopped in on his way to a board call, ordered coffee he didn't finish, and slid a check across the table, not to us, but to the community center. No fanfare, no stamp. Just numbers that meant 3 more laptops and a locking cabinet, and a stipend for the teen who had been quietly sweeping floors for free because he liked the sound the broom made. Do with it what the neighborhood asks, he said to Ari, and left before the waitress brought the pie. On a humid evening that felt like a held breath, the community center invited us to a small thank you that was really a surprise fundraiser disguised as a potluck. The director, Laugh Lines Iron Will, handed Ari a microphone. Tell them what we're doing next, she said. Tell them what they can build. Ari talked about scholarship myths and small grants and how gifts should move like water, toward the lowest places first. She talked about the new class Micah had named, Build It, Break It, Fix It, and how breaking things with care is how you learn what not to do to people. She said consent again, and I watched 4 heads nod in the back, the heads of boys who used to swagger in packs and now took turns with the soldering iron because they liked the way their hands could make light. After the clapping and cake and promises, the director pulled out a key on a lanyard. For you, she told Ari. It opens the closet with the good markers. Use it to let in other people. Ari cradled the key like a fragile egg. I'll share it, she said. That's the point. We walked home on sidewalks that held heat like secrets. The porch light made a little kingdom of our steps. Micah went inside humming that off-brand Star Wars theme he always hums when his day felt like a win. I stayed on the steps with Ari, the 2 of us watching the willow across the street comb the night. I don't know what to do with my last name, she said, not out of fear but out of the luxury of choice. Vale is a door and a trap and a bridge and a brand I didn't ask for. Keep it, I said, surprising both of us. Keep it and make it mean you. Or don't. Pick heart. Pick a third thing no one can sell. You don't owe the world a logo. She smiled, the kind that starts in the eyes and takes its time with the mouth. You make hard things sound like shelves we can build strong if we measure right. That's because shelves don't sue you, I said, and she laughed for real. A clean, clear bell that made the camera's blue eye blink like applause. We didn't plan a wedding. We didn't plan anything that night beyond pancakes for breakfast and a trip to the hardware store because the good tape measures were on sale. But 2 months later, under a tent borrowed from the rec center and lights strung by kids who had learned to trust ladders. We said the only vows we knew how to keep: show up, tell the truth, fix it when we break it. Victor walked her to the aisle and then stepped back without a speech. Ms. Lee cried and made everyone eat spring rolls between tears. The director from the center officiated with a pen behind her ear and a voice that made the law sound like common sense. Micah wore a tie loud enough to scare pigeons and read a poem that rhymed family with hammer actually, because when you're 8, you get to invent your own meter. We didn't hyphenate, we stapled. In the book we signed with legal names and shaky hands, she wrote, Area Heart, and then, in parentheses only we asked for, she added, the kind of veil you can walk through. People ask me, when they hear the story in pieces at cookouts and block meetings and over bad coffee at better times, what the turning point was. Was it the night of the SUV, the coffee shop, the judge, the key to the closet with the good markers? I tell them it was a door, not hers, mine, the one I opened in the rain when a stranger asked if a room could be a raft. Here's the part I don't put on the flyers. The same porch where power once knocked in the dark is where she said yes. Yes to breakfast, yes to brave that repeats, yes to a name she built with her own hands. And the camera above the door blinked once, like a witness, and then finally got bored.